everyone. Thanks so much for viewing this webinar as you prepare for the NYSAIS Job Fair to Promote Diversity on Saturday, February 24th, 2024. We look forward to seeing you at Columbia Grammar and Prep between 10 and 1. We invite all candidates to come in around 9:30 so that we can do a quick Q&A, orient you to the space and the way things will unfold, and then have you begin to network with school representatives. So in preparation for that event this evening, I'm really excited to have a conversation with 3 colleagues who have made a successful transition from either higher ed or public schools or parochial schools to enter independent schools at some point in their career. And in a moment, I'm going to ask each one to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about the kind of school that they transitioned from or the kind of place that they transitioned from, and speak a little bit about where they transitioned from to where they first started, because none of them are in the same place that they successfully transitioned. So I think that'll be an important theme. And if you are watching this live and are interested in posing a question to our panelists, please feel free to use the chat. If you are watching a recording of this and are interested in asking a question, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at jobfair@nysais.org, and I will happily respond, get your question, and make sure that the right colleague has an opportunity to respond, and I'm happy to facilitate that process. And now, without further ado, I'm going to invite, in the order of Tamika, Gina, and Ali, to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you transitioned from, what type of school did you transition to, and who you are right now, and in what role are you in. Thanks, everybody.
Hi, my name is Tamika Farrell, and I'm in my 18th year of teaching. I currently am the Science Department Chair Pre-K through 12 at Rye Country Day School in Rye, New York. I've been at Rye Country Day for the past 9 years, and I'm transitioning. I initially started teaching in parochial schools at a parochial school in the Bronx. I was there for 5 years, and then I transitioned into the independent school world, beginning at the Hewitt School, where I was there for 4 years, and currently now I'm at Rye Country Day.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gina Lopez. I am the Assistant Director of the Middle School at Columbia Grammar and Prep. I've been in my role now for 7 months, so newly transitioned from a public charter school in Boston, Massachusetts, where I was most recently an assistant principal, but originally started my journey as a 7th grade teacher. So excited to be here and excited to have made the transition.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ali Morgan. I'm the Director of DEI, also known as Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at Rye Country Day School. I've been in that role for 11 years. Prior to that, I worked in higher education for about 15 years at a number of institutions ranging from the New School, City University of New York, including John Jay College, and most recently before working here, SUNY, Westchester Community College. And I think it's worth mentioning that part of my transition to independent schools was I already had a connection as a parent, an involved parent at several schools, including the Town School and Chapin School. And that is part of my story, but also part of not just how I got interested in independent schools, but the many connections that you're going to hear more about today.
Thank you, George. So I am so glad, as you can listen, we have someone who's transitioned from higher education, someone from parochial school, and someone from public charter school. So one of the things that I would love for you all to be able to do is really compare and contrast the kinds of schools that you came from, what makes independent schools unique to your previous employment, just to give us a sense, and then the way to Answer will be Gina, Ali, and Tamika.
Awesome. So I transitioned from a public charter school in Boston. So, I mean, I'm transitioning not just from public to independent, but also state lines, which is a big change. I think my experience at public charter, um, I had a lot of direct, constant supervision, which I think was really positive in a lot of ways, but I think didn't allow me to always spread my wings and really flex the things that I knew, and the things I had worked on for so long. And I think this opportunity now has allowed me to do that, both in all the positive ways to really highlight my strengths, but also really identify my areas of growth, and work with my manager, and my team to kind of figure out what that means for me in my journey. So that's been a really big opportunity that I'm really grateful for.
I think there's so many, things that come to mind. The one that I want to focus on and share with you, and I'm kind of modeling a little bit by what I'm wearing, is how many different things you can get involved in. Independent school, and again, I knew a lot about this as a parent, but I think, joining a community where my primary role, which I'm still in, is a senior administration role of DEI, but also being able to teach several classes in different departments. Even I'm trained in the performing arts, so I've been teaching drama, part of the drama and dance department my whole time, my whole tenure, and done different things over the years in that department. But I added humanities along the way, and coaching as well. That's I think a big aspect of independent schools, and in some ways people say that's expected, not that you will do it, but that it's an option, right? In many ways our schools are designed or built around the idea that all of us will get involved in some way, and some might even find it a little unusual that a administrator would still be doing some of these things. But I'm here to share that that's, I think a big part of a lot of the schools. Each school's a little different, of course, but the fact that those types of things can happen really appealed to me. And I view it as like an extension of the kids in terms of, you know, developing their passions. And of course, that can happen in any environment. But the independent school world is sort of designed in a way where there's so much creativity and flexibility that you can really create something that doesn't exist or that you never imagined. And so for me, that's been a big part of my work, and a big part of what's kept me going over many years, is the ability to do some different things.
I kind of stumbled into the independent school world by accident. I went to Catholic school my entire life. Even my university was Catholic, and I taught at a Catholic school for 5 years. But as you know, one of the consequences of the financial crisis in 2008 is that a lot of the programs that help to fund student scholarships or grants that would allow them to go to Catholic school, so many of them ended up just ending because we didn't have the means anymore. So a lot of Catholic schools ended up closing. Mine ended up being one of them. So looking for another career path, I was either considering other Catholic schools, and then I found out more about independent schools. And one of the draws for me was, as a teacher, the science teacher, being able to craft my curriculum. So having a sense of autonomy in terms of the structure of what I would like to teach, and not really being so tightly bound to the New York State Regent standards, especially as a chemistry teacher, where teaching that course according to New York Regent standards doesn't go into the depth of the material that would really make students successful if they chose to pursue it in the future. So once I transitioned into an independent school, it was like a whole new world in terms of the access that you have in terms of facilities and lab spaces, the things that you'll use on your day-to-day life, and even some of the things that you would have never considered. So having access to a gym, having access to professional development opportunities, those were some of the components that really stuck out for me when I was looking into independent schools and their ability of what they have to offer you as an employee, in addition to what you can contribute to their community.
Thank you so much for speaking a little bit about the professional journey and how you eventually found independent schools. Ali, what advice would you offer candidates transitioning from higher ed? What are some of the, you've been through an interview process at the higher ed level, and you've been through interview processes at schools, both as a candidate to join the schools that you've worked in, and also as someone who is participating in now as an employee, listening to and really assessing candidates as they go through the hiring process to transition into schools. I would love to hear some advice from you and some thoughts and reflections, and then I'll come back to Tamika and Gina and draw on their wisdom as well.
Awesome. Yeah, higher ed is, in many ways is very different, of course, but has a lot of the elements of independent schools in terms of there's a range of, I've had the, privilege and to work at different schools, public, private, large, small, on the higher ed side. And, there's all these different roles. I think for me, the starting point in many ways is that many, if not all of our schools are college preparatory, prep schools or college preparatory schools. And I know that term is used and it's meaningful. It's for some of us so core, you don't even think about it much because it's a sort of a given that students, whether you end in 8th grade or 9th grade or go all the way to 12th, which a lot of schools do, that's the goal, right? To prepare these students, every student to leave the school so prepared for college. And I think, for the most part, all of our schools do that really well. So the other side of that is college, right? Higher ed. And again, there's a range there. I've worked in, again, like the community college type of environment where that's literally picking it right back up, or, some 4-year or even, PhD or granting institutions. And so I start there because I do think there's a sort of a natural cachet from coming from a college or a university or higher education environment to a school. I do think that, and for better or worse, I think there's a lot of good in that. I think there's a lot of like, well, I don't know. It depends on what your role is. But I gravitated toward, I still remember vividly my first year where, I was definitely getting to know people and, happy to collaborate and learn more. But the college office, the college counseling office was a sort of a natural connection for me. But by the way, my background in higher ed was mostly student services, financial aid, bursar, those types of things. And I was a professor also. I was an adjunct for a while. So, I had that lens. And, my first couple of years, I didn't teach in the high school. And I remember someone saying to me, that's important for you to consider doing for a lot of reasons. But one of the reasons was sort of this cachet, or the idea that like, sort of a mutual respect around teaching these youngsters. And I love teaching, so that was not an issue, but I understood what they meant over time. So that's a big area of it. I think also like some of the core things like collaboration and teamwork, right? These are terms we use a lot. I think we have that in common. So I think that would be something that I would think if you're coming from higher ed, you can walk with confidence in an independent school, knowing that, you have some really strong skills that you've been able to practice that are applicable. It's interesting, Liz, earlier you said something about the interview process, and it really took me back. That was a very good one for you to mention, because a distinction of the two is in higher ed, you would have a table or a committee of 15 or 20 people or whatever the number is, depending on the role, meeting you for an hour or two to interview you. That was sort of a standard thing, and definitely consensus and, input from other, many people is valued. Independent schools have that, but instead of the table, you would meet with us all day. And I think as someone who's been through that, and I think my colleagues here have been through that, and they remember that, I remember thinking, wow, I need to drink my water. Because, and there were a few people along the way who kept making sure I was drinking my water, which I thanked them later when I got to justice. Thank you so much. How did you know? They were like, it's a long day. But that, I think in essence is trying to give you, it's giving you a sense of what the community is all about, right? We really value all these different people. And at an independent school, you are going to work with all those people, right? Maybe not every day and every part of the day, but they are a big part of the community. So those things come to mind, Liz, for me.
Excellent overview, and just giving us a glimpse into, that subtle difference. Yes, like 1 hour versus a full day is a great reminder. I would love to hear advice that Tamika and Gina can think about and can offer. You've both transitioned from parochial school, and I loved, Tamika, that you gave the context of you had attended and been exposed to parochial or and specifically Catholic school education all of your life, including through college. And then Gina, you mentioned the transition from a public charter in a different state coming here. So if you could just think about and reflect on those experiences and some advice that you would offer candidates, or maybe even what would you tell yourself, however many years ago you transitioned into independent schools, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you find helpful? Gita, kick us off, and then to
Yeah, so my experience is, fairly recent, less than a year ago. And I would say the thing I would tell myself is to be really picky. If you start your process early, you have that opportunity to be picky, look at the school's mission, look at their values, and make sure that you are picking a school that fits your why. I think it's really important. Like, this is work where we spend, all hours of the day working, and then sometimes all hours of the night working. So you want to make sure that the community that you land in is one that you can see yourself doing the work even when the hours are long. So just, again, making sure that that why aligns. And also as early as you can start your process is really important so that you aren't just scrambling at the end of it, I think is super important.
Coming from a parochial school, most parochial schools tend to be really small. So my biggest piece of advice is when looking at independent schools, not to be overwhelmed by this structure of the systems that are in place to support you, but really take the time to dive into understanding why they're there. Where in parochial schools, your principal is your be all end all. So many times I had to go to the principal for not just disciplinary concerns, but questions I had about the curriculum, questions I had about a student on their day-to-day basis, because they might not have had individual dean support roles. So looking at the structure of each independent school is really important in terms of understanding how you are going to best be prepared for dealing with the number of challenges you might come up against as a teacher in a new school community. Especially with a lot of independent schools, you might be very unfamiliar with parent demographics and parent needs. So finding, the DEI office, for instance, right, to help support you in navigating those conversations and discussions, because in a Catholic school, we didn't have systems like that. We didn't have people like that where we can lean on and feel comfortable and confident with looking for advice. The other big thing I would consider is that when thinking overall about what the school is offering you, there's so many things to consider beyond just the salary. It's also professional development opportunities. I've been fortunate to be in places where if I wanted to go to a conference, it was like, yeah, sure, of course you can go there. Or if I wanted to apply for a grant to transform my curriculum or to do some additional work to create new curriculum, that provided that sort of support, where if I were in parochial school, I would have never known that things like that existed. So during the interview process, definitely ask about what types of systems and structures are in place to help support you in your growth.
great advice. So just to underscore, understand the importance of staying focused and being selective in your process and doing your research in advance, making sure that you, during the process, ask the kinds of questions that are going to give you a sense of where are some of the support mechanisms that exist and what are some ways to really grow your craft as an educator, as a teacher through professional development. And also really the all-important self-care piece, knowing that, there's a long day and it's really a marathon, it's not a race, and really going through and making sure that in the process that you are fully prepared and that you've done your homework and you're also, on the very basic level, staying hydrated. Love those suggestions. Let's talk a little bit about the teaching demo for those that step into a classroom, they're stepping into a position. What are some of the things that you know whoever is assessing and observing the candidate is looking for? What are some of those elements of the teaching demo Tamika, would love to hear from you, and then Gina, Ali, whichever one of you wants to offer some additional insight into the all-important teaching demo.
It's so interesting because being on both sides of the coin, I feel that my perspective has changed a bit. Whereas when I was interviewing in demo lessons, I was so concerned in making sure that I can prove that I was knowledgeable about every single aspect or anticipating any type of question that might come up during my demo lesson, whether it was from a student or from another colleague, a potential colleague. But I realized that a lot of it is about showing that you can make authentic connections with the students. I think students are the most reliable indicator of how successful a teacher could be in the classroom. So when a lot of times, especially in my role as department chair, if I see a demo lesson where I personally feel that it went great, I always like to circle back with students and say, hey, what did you think of so-and-so's lesson? And they're like, wow, I really like them. They did a really good job with explaining X, Y, and Z. I think really just showing up, and kids can tell when you're putting on an act or a facade. They do that better than most adults can. So they're really good with weeding out, the candidate who really genuinely does enjoy teaching versus the candidate who really just needs a job. So I think showing up as your best and authentic self and also being knowledgeable and being organized are going to be really key factors. Showing up with a plan. Schools might communicate very differently in terms of their expectation of what the demo lesson might look like. So whether your plan, especially for the sciences, communicating, hey, do you have these materials or these demos that I would, these materials for demo that I would like to use, communicating with the school or coming prepared with it on your own is super important. Understanding the layout of the classroom and the spaces and the technology that exists. So even something that you take for granted as the type of computer you might use, right? So if you're coming into a school that is really set up for using a Mac and they might not have a dongle that works for your computer, being preemptively prepared for that. So in the demo lesson, I think, showing up as yourself is key, but really making those authentic connections with your potential colleagues and your students are really going to be able to put you in another plane when being considered for a role.
Mika, that was thorough as usual. I know you. I just want to mention, you kind of touched upon this, but and again, I'll just for myself, I didn't do a demo, and I think that's just something of reference. I can't say you can plan for that, folks, but I think it's because I was hired as this administrator. But they definitely, I think in my original job description, it did say teach a class, but that wasn't a focus. I think they were happy for me to join the team, and I definitely hit the ground running with teaching, but I didn't actually do a demo. But certainly being on the other side, as Tamika reference, just that time management piece, and literally so, meaning like, if you got 50 minutes, you don't have to get 49 point, you don't want to be obviously way over and not finishing up because that's just good teaching, right? And then you also don't want to leave a ton of time. So most people will get that right. I just mention it because I've, again, seen some good teachers not get that right. And it is something that on the, being on the inside, people note as a challenge because that's going to be big part of the job, right? Particularly, it's important for any age, but certain ages, thinking about middle school or even lower school, where like, every minute is kind of accounted for in some way in terms of how you manage the children. Upper school has a version of that, but it's very different. So I just want to mention that, but I don't know, Gina may have something too.
Yeah, no, I think those are all really good pieces of advice. And I think similarly to you, Ali, I didn't have to do a demo lesson, but I think being prepared to ask for feedback or just receive feedback without you having asked, I think is really important. I think gives you a good sense of what the school is looking for in the demo lesson. Even if you did do a fantastic job, those of us who have been teaching for as long as we have been teaching still have space and room for growth, and it'll kind of ground you in what the school is looking for and how they're developing their teachers year to year. And just also be prepared for the unexpected. I think in the middle school setting, at least, I mean, kids are going to be kids all the way through, regardless of what kind of school you're coming from. So just be prepared for kids to interact with you in ways that you didn't expect or ask the questions that you didn't think were coming. And again, I think kind of like to what Tamika was alluding to, respond in a way that's authentic to you. Because kids will respond with you and work with you in that way.
And just one other thing to add, like in the overall interviewing process, like Ali alluded to earlier, with the Rye Country Day, how our experience was, it really was an all-day opportunity. For someone who's not familiar with that, it could be very overwhelming. But another piece of advice is understanding why the structure is that way. So understanding, why are you meeting with the director of public purpose? Why are you meeting with grade level deans? But also getting some information about those people and their specific roles in the event that you were going to get hired by them, what your communication would be like on a day-to-day basis, and who you can kind of rely on, whether it's issues of curriculum or disciplinary issues with children, who you should reach out to and who you should communicate with. So I always think it's helpful to research on the school's website. I think Jean mentioned it earlier, looking at the overall mission of the school and seeing how all of those characters fit into those roles.
And I think, Tamika, just one last thing to add on. I think when you're going through the interview process, you're kind of worried about asking too many questions or asking the wrong questions. I think the right community for you will take all of that information and be excited to answer it for you. So do not be afraid to ask all those questions.
Definitely.
The level of exceptional insight that the three of you are offering is really spectacular. And I just want to highlight the importance of doing your research in advance, particularly engaging that website. Everyone will get, during an interview process, just a list of who they're going to be meeting with. And it is more often than not a meeting here, a demo lesson, and it isn't, there isn't a rhyme or reason. Some schools have a search committee and they're sort of present, members of the search committee are present, or representatives are present for every aspect of it. Depending on the role, as has been mentioned, you may be asked to teach a demo lesson. I've known of candidates who ended up, part of the time included recess duty, and just to be able to really interact with kids. I loved that you all mentioned, the value of student input. Believe it or not, your interview starts the second you arrive on campus, with the campus safety personnel that welcomes you in with some form of ID, and then the administrative support personnel that make sure that you can go from A to B, etc. Person who's going to tell you where things are, where the classroom is located, in advance of the person formally welcoming you. The process has started, and to really keep in mind all of those elements, as well as, and thank you, Tamika, for mentioning the technology piece. Have a plan A, have a plan B, have a plan C, because inevitably something will go wrong. And being able to flex and anticipate your needs. Loved hearing, bring your supplies if you can. I'm actually a visual learner, and so whenever I've done a demo lesson, one of the things that I've asked is for somebody to take a picture of the room. And in one of the spaces that I did a demo lesson, there actually weren't formal desks. There were chairs sitting in a U shape or in a picture frame. And that was an important detail for me to know, because if I was going to have them doing some writing, what are they going to be writing on? And if you're going to have students doing some writing, do you have pens, paper, et cetera. So just thinking about those kinds of things. And finally, if you have the list of people that you're going to be meeting with, take a moment, go to the website, and most of our websites will either have a directory, and they'll have an image of what somebody looks like. If you're like most people, just being able to be familiar with who you might be meeting with is really helpful, just to see people's faces and look a little bit at some of the programs or some of the roles that people are connected to. Sometimes they'll tell you how long they've been at the school. So that's a point of engagement, to be able to ask, oh, Gina, you recently joined within the last year, or Ali, you've been here for 11 years, or whatever it might be. And it's just a way to engage. So I really, really appreciate just sort of the breadth and depth of the importance of the teaching demo and what people will be looking for. let's talk a little bit about the salaries and benefits, and in just creating a context for our listeners and viewers. We are not pretending to give you all the information about every specific role or every specific position or transition that you might be contemplating. Every situation is different, and it is all relative to your particular circumstances and where you are. In some cases, you're hearing people have moved from one type of school to another, or from one state and one type of school to another. Whatever the possibilities are, there are over 200 independent schools in New York State that are NYSAIS member schools, and there will be over 90 that will be at Saturday, February 24th's job fair. So chances are there's going to be at least one, my guess is up to 5 schools, and being in person is going to be super helpful. Some schools will tell you they have a salary, just a scale already provided for you. Some schools already have their benefit information already on their websites. Do your homework. That's a great way to get information. But in general, given that each of you transitioned, again, not asking for specifics about your particular current or previous salary, but just in general, can you frame what should people expect? Gina, Ali, and Tamika?
I mean, I think beyond your salary and your benefits, I think the opportunity to get PD funds is something that is, is brand new to me this year. We have the opportunity for a teacher to, choose their own professional development. And sometimes that's one thing that we can cover. Sometimes it's multiple. So that opportunity is really important. We have a summer grant program as well, in addition to the year-long PD fund, where teachers can travel and think about what that means for their classroom and their own development. And that's an additional set of funds. I think there's so many opportunities in terms of finances to coach, to do additional work beyond your school day duties. And so it's really important to ask, see what's available. Your days look different, your hours look different depending on your role. I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think when you're going through that interview process, to ask all those questions about what is expected of you, what more you can do. So I think those are things to just think about from the beginning.
Yeah, adding to that, I think when we think of the term salary and benefits, those are sort of universal terms, but they mean different things, certainly. And I think one distinction I'll make is between public and private, of either higher ed or independent schools. I think public, you see a lot of scales, or like when I worked at CUNY and SUNY, but CUNY in particular, they had bargain, you're part of a union, and there's a whole thing with that. And so that's more unusual on the independent school side, particularly in this area. So I should have to say is that people often are coming from if you're transitioning from higher ed, for example, in a public institution, you already sort of have a sense of what salary is equated to a role, right? Whether it's a range or not. By the way, shout out to the recent shift where you now disclose the range in New York, which has been helping. I think that's a big, I don't know how everyone feels about it. I think there's some folks, I'm an administrator, so I can speak to this. It may be a little harder, but I think it's good for folks transitioning to have a better sense, because for years it would be, you'd have to really talk to people or go for it. But regardless of that, I think, knowing your worth is always important. Understanding there's going to be a negotiation, or there could be, and that could be a positive, I view that as positive. I think some people who don't have experience with that may view that as, oh, I don't know, I don't want to, come across a certain way, but I just want to say that's out there. But really the benefit side, in terms of, PD you heard about, I think, everything from some graduate study, some additional courses for yourself, sometimes there's some benefits for your family. Obviously, health and those types of things are important. I mean, I'll even shout out breakfast and lunch. We provide free breakfast, or nice breakfast, that most people would love to have every day. That's covered. We do that for the whole school, including the employees. And then like lunch is very nice lunch. I mean, we got full salad bars and panini stations and so on. And some do it a lot better than we do, and we do it pretty well. So I think that will feel different, and it's a real benefit. and just some flexibility there, even childcare and different things like that. So I think many schools will be happy to talk to you more about that. And I think that's something they're proud of. And even some, our school doesn't do it this way, but I think some schools have some, maybe not necessarily arranged, including tuition remission, but just some acknowledgement of being an employee at the school impacts an admissions process if your child were to, apply. And like for example, where our school's called is, more of like a family-friendly school, which means that's a factor. All things being equal, we would want to keep people, in our program. So things like that come to mind. And then on the straight salary side, I do remember vividly, like, talking. So let me mention who you might talk to, right? I think when I started, it was the head of school, and the head of school is still involved, but right now it would be like the head of finance or the VP, assistant head for finance. And I think that's worth mentioning that not that, in my case, higher ed wouldn't have, primarily HR usually would handle those types of things with a recommendation from, like for us, the vice president of, your department was heavily involved, but that's a little different. It feels more personable. There's a lot more of that, and that could be that good, but if you're not used to that, it might not feel as good. It's like, oh, who's this person who holds the keys to what I'm going to make? Those are the things that come to mind.
And just speaking for the parochial school side, there was, in my opinion, there's a large difference in the salary that was offered. And speaking to the point that Ali mentioned about the ability to negotiate, right? So having some good idea of data points in terms of where you stand due to however many years you've been teaching, your level of education, your experience, what you're contributing are huge factors. The other thing to consider, especially in New York, because the school calendar looks so different, the math nerd in me, I look at a dollars and cents approach, right? So if you're starting at Labor Day, school in Labor Day, but you're done, like in my case, but I think June 6th or June 7th this year, that feels a little bit different than going until like the very end of June, June 30th, grading Regents exams and doing all of that. So considering that as a factor of what your full salary package is. Additionally, even like Ali mentioned, those fringe benefits like having free breakfast, free lunch, Right Country Day, we have gym access. All of those are little things that add up. You have childcare benefits that you can take advantage of that would help contribute, pre-tax benefits toward whether it's camp expenses or daycare expenses. Those are really, important things to consider. Some schools looking at housing benefits for them. So if you're able to live on campus, that's some things that some schools do offer that can make a world of difference if you choose to accept a role in, New York State or New York City, which is a very high cost of living area. It could really make or break, what a candidate why a candidate would decide to go with one school or another.
Vacation time, sick
Yeah,
days. I
yeah.
mean, you mentioned it. Gina's nodding. She's like, oh yeah, we were just talking as a team about the upcoming President's Weekend. And again, I know public institutions may have some of that, but it is very generous. I mean, the fact that we have two different 2-week breaks.
Mhm.
It's called winter break. Yeah, I think we know what that is. And then we have one called spring break. And higher ed does not have that. Oh no. Obviously, if you're a professor, you have a whole different schedule. Bless you. But for most people who work in higher ed, you're work, you get some holidays, but nothing like that. And that was huge, I mean, most people would love that, but you have a family or, different things like that. That's a huge benefit. You're still ending a lot early, as Tamika mentioned, and we pack a lot into a day for sure. But having those two distinct, so 4 weeks that you get, and I'm not talking about the summer, right? Obviously administrators have a little different schedule, but like a teacher, so those are big benefits. And I think people usually like that a lot.
Yeah, and then other things to consider too are, one of the benefits of being in a private school is the ability of, if you see a need for a program or an activity that needs, you feel, hey, why don't we have this? Your school would most likely say, you know what, that's great. Like draft up something, we can support you. And that can become somewhat of a stipended role for you where you can do what you enjoy and get paid for it. Also looking at how a school acknowledges their employees. So I've been very fortunate to get a travel grant, and then I got another grant last year, that I was nominated for, which I was, super honored about and surprised by it, But it's good to feel acknowledged, and it's good to get the extra money for your acknowledgement. And I think that by those efforts, it makes you feel good showing up to work each day, and it makes you feel recognized for what you do on a day-to-day basis. So that's just something going beyond the salary component, where you should look at how the school treats their employees that are doing well and really want to be there.
The other area that I would want to provide a little bit of context is, we alluded to it a little bit, there are lots of stipends within independent schools for different positions that really help the school be of service to families, be of service to employees. Examples are early drop-off, end of day after school. Those are always opportunities for employees to earn additional compensation because schools want to offer early drop-off or after-school enrichment experiences for students, and there's a compensation that comes with that, whatever you offer. Similarly, and this is something to really think about, for those of you that are looking to make a transition from, whatever school or type of school you've been in, definitely think about summer. Think about summer as an opportunity to earn some additional money, which will go towards the bottom line of your overall compensation for the year. And it will give you an opportunity to get to know many of the students, many of their families, many of your colleagues. Most people like to stay around. It does not last the whole summer. It is a finite amount of time. It begins and ends, and you still have some portion of time to yourself to rejuvenate and restore. I always say to people, and I so appreciated just the dollars and cents, take a look at what your day costs you in wherever you are, based on however many days you have to work. Most independent schools are in session somewhere between 165 and 170 days. Most public and charter schools exceed 180. And in higher ed, as Ali already mentioned, there are no breaks. And there are certainly moments where there are half days and additional days that are part of your experience as well. So if nothing else, one takeaway that I'm hoping people have from this particular segment, because you all three have done an exceptional job of making it so comprehensive. If you are stuck, if you're wondering, if you're at the point where you're trying to decide, please reach out. Even though the job fair may have passed, at that point, you're deep in the process and contemplating, please reach out to jobfair@nysais.org. I promise you, that is me. I will do everything I can to be able to help and guide you in the process, because I really think it's important for you to make as informed a decision as possible. And as we near the end of our time together, I would love to hear from you all, what keeps you in these schools? So you've made a successful transition. In some cases, you've moved from one type of school to another. What is sort of feeding your desire to be employed within independent schools, knowing, let's call it what it is, there is work to be done everywhere. And we know the importance of all children seeing exceptional role models in every facet of their life, whether they're in higher ed or in early childhood and all points in between. But what keeps each of you? I'm going to invite Tamika, then Ali, and then Gina.
When I think about independent schools and their structure, they really do, especially as a woman of color, it really gives me a unique perspective into like how education really, should be to enhance children and how to enhance our craft. And so at an independent school where I'm really passionate about science, I'm really passionate about curriculum, I was able to really feel free in a sense to say, hey, what do students find most useful? Or where are they going to find real world applications of this, right? And how can I put this into my curriculum? And knowing that I have the support to do that is really important. So that's something that didn't really exist in a parochial school system, especially when teaching some subjects within biology where you're like, oh, I'm walking on eggshells. How do I approach this? How will I be received if I talk about it this way? So I feel that knowing that I have support to do what I want to do with my curriculum within reason, and also coming up with ways to assess my students and that would really challenge them and really prepare them for the next step in life. So whether that's college or whether it's being an informed citizen, looking at their day-to-day world, I feel that our schools hire us because they trust that we are experts. And I feel that it's really important to feel trusted as educators, to know that we are capable, we are bright, and we are contributing something. So one of the ways that I look at job searches when people are new to the independent school world, sometimes it can be very intimidating, but also remembering like you have so much to offer them. It's not just the school offering you something. So and I feel that I bring a unique perspective and insight with my experiences to students that don't necessarily look like me, that they might not have seen otherwise. So that's one of the reasons why I've enjoyed working and staying at an independent school.
Oh, there's so much I could say. I mean, you're hearing it all throughout the program. I got to shout out Tamika. I get to work with her. She's part of why. You know, our colleagues are a big part of it. I want to acknowledge like the journey. Like I really do feel honored and appreciate all the institutions and organizations I worked at. They really have contributed to who I am, and I felt like I, made an impact. That being said, independent schools, man, they spoil us. They do. The resources are different. Different. That doesn't mean you can't have a meaningful experience a lot of places, but once you get here, they are designed to keep you here. Now, of course, you can do all kinds of cool things. I'm an example of someone who's been at a place for a long time and just done different things, and that's been a big part of my story. Also, my family, that's a big part of it. My daughter, my youngest goes to school with me, and I got here first, as I like to say, but she's doing well, and she's in high school now with Miss Farrell, and which is cool. And a lot of folks, you'll see that's not uncommon, right? And obviously, if you have multiple kids, it has to be, environment that works for you. A lot of people would choose a different school, all that's cool. But the fact that that's an extension of the family feel, I think the independent schools can have. And sometimes you want to, go to your real home, but they design some of them. Day schools feel like boarding schools in the sense of there's so much going on from the beginning of the day all the way to the end. So I think that those play a factor. The students, the families, like all the members of the community are a big reason that they've kept me going, a lot of us going. That sense of, Tamika alluded to it, like I'm giving you, I'm contributing greatly to your experience. And a cool thing that, again, I don't think is unique to us, but it stands out is the kids come back. It's a tradition at our school that and they get, if you're not there that day, if they miss you, they won't leave till they find you. Where's Miss Farrell? And you've been here a while, you really get to experience that. It's pretty cool. And we stay in touch. And again, these are not unique to independent schools, but I do think it feels like a core component of the program and the community and like what we're all about. Those things jump out. But again, a lot of what we shared is why it's like there's a lot of cool things going on in independent schools.
Yeah, I think those are all really great points. And I haven't been in my journey long enough to think about what has kept me here. But I think in terms of what will be keeping me here, I think, in public school right now, you would be thinking about test prep, right? We have an upcoming state test. How are kids best prepared? And then what does that mean for the school after that? And I think it is so nice to walk in every day and think about like kids just learning because that's what they deserve, right? They get to learn and teachers get to teach. And that pressure of that test, that looming test that, unfortunately I came from a school where the majority of our kids were Black and brown, and the idea of testing and the doors that it could or could not open was really intimidating for our school and for our kids. And that's something that I don't have to worry about now. The work that we do with kids is because we just want them to discover new things and create and innovate. So I think that's one of those things that is really, really nice and refreshing. It feels like school is supposed to just be what it is day to day. I think kind of to like what Ali alluded, which is just like schools do spoil you. There's so many opportunities for you to learn new things and grow because of all the resources that we have. And I think kind of like what I mentioned earlier, it is a really nice opportunity to flex what you know, question things that exist. And then if you have the, you know, the team behind you that is going to push you to achieve those things, like you can really accomplish great things outside of the systems that I think sometimes public schools don't really allow you to do. So there's just so much flexibility and trust and autonomy that, you know, I don't think I would trade right now.
Thank you all so much for sharing your perspectives. I think it's really important to note that, yes, there's a real value to the experience. Um, each one of you is a gift, and each of you brings all of who you are. And there are moments where that may be a little bit challenging for others, and it may be challenging for you. And yet, part of the experience is to really leverage the mission of the school and center young people in the process and make sure that all of who you are is really valuable and is a value add to the community that you are a part of. And there's always an opportunity for growth and adjustment in the ways in which we engage each other. And that's what it means to be part of sort of a greater sense of a greater community. I want to thank you, all of you, Tamika, Gina, Ali, for your wisdom and for the pieces of advice that you gave, which were invaluable. To everyone who is viewing, whether you watched us live or you are watching this at your own time, we are grateful that you are interested in preparing and thinking about the transition. Please make sure to do your homework in advance. Please reach out if we can be helpful. Please remember the importance of pre-registering and spreading the word about the NYSAIS Job Fair to promote diversity. It is one event that happens once a year. We are in our 35th year and are very proud of the impact we have had. And we want to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to be aware of the job fair, where over 90 schools will be present on Saturday, February 24th from 10 to 1. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to jobfair@nysais.org. As always, I want to thank my colleagues at NYSAIS and especially George, who provided us with tech support behind the scenes. And to everyone viewing this, every webinar from the last few years is available on the NYSAIS website. I encourage you to watch them. Each one has different pieces of information and tidbits. All skills and all webinars are transferable and relevant to 2024 as you approach this process. And I especially want to encourage you to look at the resume do's and don'ts, because it is important to make sure that you avoid in your transition some of the language challenges on resumes that make it very hard to understand what exactly are the skills that you have, because there's a lot of acronyms or explanations of testing, to the point that Gina brought up, that are not necessarily helpful to someone reading your resume to understand and assess whether you can make a smooth transition to an independent school classroom and community. If you have any more questions about that, again, do not hesitate to reach out, jobfair@nysais.org. My name is Liz Fernandez. I am thrilled to welcome you to this evening, and thank you for your time. Thank you to Gina, Tamika, and Ali. And I look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Have a great night, everyone. Buenas noches.